Hello and welcome to another video. This video is going to be different because today, as you saw by the title, how valid is a ninja in Shinobi Striker? And so that's what we are going to be doing. We are going to be trying to use most of the realistic ninja tools and weapons and, well, ninjutsus that would technically translate to assassination or technically would translate to what a Knight Raider ninja would do. So we first have the Kusurigama for our range class, and this is going to be for combat battle. So we have the Kusurigama with the chain link rope dart at the very end, which is good for pulling people in, and in general for a bit more of a distance kind of damage and sometimes even parrying weapons and wrapping the chain around the weapon. Then we have the black sword chakra darts. Now, the only reason that we're using this as kind of like our throwing knife instead of the senbons is because the senbons are more or less kind of someone who would be associated with a healer or, you know, a medical doctor of some sort as a espionage kind of thing. So that's why we're going to use the black sword chakra darts as something closely resembling of what a Knight Raider Shinobi would use. We're going to use Flying Raijin Slice as the surprise assassination attack and Chikashido, so that then we can actually go ahead and be invisible. Then we have Ink Clone, so that then we can distract and disappear. And then we have Tendon Paper Bomb, just because Knight Raiders would commit arson at the very end of most things, or they would go ahead and commit arson as a distraction. Next up is our healer, and the healer has the Famed Blade Kurosawa Tsubaki, and well, this would technically be considered a katana of some sorts, but it has no actual curve, so we are going to call it a ninjato. It's just a very long one. So yeah, ninjas would actually go ahead and use the hilt sometimes, and actually use it to climb over walls and such, if you didn't know that before. But yeah, cool kind of little detail. But other than that, yeah, it's just the basic ninjata that you would use for assassinations and such. But ninjas would obviously avoid violence, and they'd rather steal scrolls. Now, Makibishi spikes is what they used when they did get into trouble, and then they'll throw it at the ground, and then it would slow down the enemy because it would be prickly on their feet. Then we have Palm Sage to go ahead and heal ourselves and our teammates and essentially just patch our wounds, because a lot of Shinobis would have so. And then we have Shadow Possession as our assassination technique. So, kind of like, just assassination technique. We're just going to say it as that. And then lastly, we have defense, and as you saw, we have the bow staff, which they probably didn't use, but there's no other better weapon. And we're going to use Makibishi spikes, despite considering the black staff being actually quite, close and actual use to throwing knives and stuff. But yeah, we're going to use Koei Climax, and we're going to use Toad Oil Bomb with Hidden Mist Jutsu. And I think I will go ahead and have some more footage, but this time with the Sukuna Black Staff rods. Next we have the attack type. We're going to use Demon Roar, and we're going to use Smoke Flash, and we're going to use Flying Raijin, Burning Ash Jutsu, and Koto. The main reason why is because Demon Roar was the closest weapon that we could get to a proper sword, and Smoke Flash is essentially Mitsubishi, and Burning Ash is essentially the Shinobis committing arson by blowing up the whole place and using it as a distraction. So anywho, after dealing with a few matches of that, finally I was able to play some normal games, despite the modders. So yeah, this build is quite unique, not really unique, but it is quite strong, and you know it's built for assassination, and that's what I like the most about it, because it genuinely allows you to go invisible, hit someone from behind, deal double the damage that you normally would because it allows you to, and because it's meant to be an assassination technique. And yeah, those two were dumb enough to follow me all the way down there, and they don't have enough movement speed to actually keep up. So I managed to actually successfully escape like a ninja, you could say. They didn't even know I was gone. But yeah, other than that, it is incredibly strong and really good when someone has a quarter of their health left. So it's really good at picking off enemies, but it's also really good at making sure enemies actually lose all their health. So it's great in both ways. So, you know, it basically deletes half of someone's HP bar as long as you actually hit them in the back and you use Shido to get that extra damage in. Other than that though, you know, we use tandem paper bomb like as if we're blowing up the place, and it's a great distraction because yeah, and then we tried to escape and we successfully did again on a very low HP, but no one can really stop us, and that was pretty much the end of the game. So yeah, that range build works out well in combat battle, just maybe. Now we have flag battle, and this build is going to be using poison smoke bomb as our kind of Mitsubishi, and we again are going to have invisibility as sneaking around and, you know, trying to take the flag without the enemy knowing. And it successfully worked. However, obviously once you have the flag, everyone knows where you are, so we go deploy our Mitsubishi in emergency, and then we gotta run away again, and then we gotta go in stealth where the shadows are, and we're gonna get hit by all the above, and yet we're somehow gonna still escape. And then we're gonna use Mitsubishi again, and then our teammate is going to put down a water pillar, and that is honestly the best teammate that you could ever ask for in that situation. But yeah, anyway, we managed to deliver the first flag, and then our teammate delivers the second flag, and that's the end of that match. And I didn't have flag battle again after that, so it is what it is. But yeah, at least now we know that, you know, for flag battle, if you want to be sneaky and try to grab it, technically you could, in a Shinobi fashion. Now, I may have been a little bit more lenient because the weapon is kind of strong, but it is the closest weapon without too many special effects, and it does do considerable damage, and it does kind of look the part. Other than that, you know, we're using quite strong ninjutsus and quite strong ninja tools actually, so this build is technically more viable than most of the other builds in the current, you know, heat of the meta ninjutsus and climate. So yeah, and we're gonna use Mitsubishi just as an extra bonus damage because why not? And yeah, it's essentially just a torture build, to be very honest with you, because I'm blinding them constantly. It's the equivalent of using an infinite amount of Mitsubishi in this current situation anyway. And yeah, we're using Mitsubishi with literally just whatever we're using to commit arson with, which is burning ash jutsu right now. And it's working, and it's definitely gonna be fucking them up because they don't know what the fuck is happening. They're just blinded on their screen. It is literally a CS:GO flashback. So yeah. Other than that, you know, I'd say this build is valid. Works really well. And you know, the flying Raijin is maybe the only thing that I'd say is less Shinobi-like, but it's also kind of more Shinobi-like because, you know, they would have escape routes, they would go ahead and plan their exits before anything, and yeah. And in this situation, it's more like, oh, I'm discovered, so I must run away. So it's not like a, you know, I mean, technically, I must fight to the death, more accurately with this build, because there is no escape. It's a combat battle. But yeah, at least we did the escape version of a Shinobi, or ninja. Let's just say ninja instead. So, we did the escape version of a ninja in the first build, where literally we went invisible, used flying Raijin Slice to literally cut our enemies to death, and yeah, we escaped. Then we used our range build, which was literally to steal information and then get out of it alive, which we technically did. So that was cool again. And then now we're using something for literal combat. So, it's like a Shinobi being exposed. So, they're not exactly in their element, but they are quite close to it. So, yeah. Other than that, quite literally, we're covering at least half of it. And I think the next half is just going to be very simple because I only have a very few builds in mind that could actually fit the whole ninja thing. So unless there's more ninja builds that someone would like me to try out and see, if it's plausibly what a real ninja would use, please let me know. But other than that, I guess I should drop a little bit of, of an information where Shinobis would actually wear it's not, they don't wear black outfits. They don't actually wear the classic black that we seen in Hollywood and such. It's actually indigo. They actually wear dark indigo, kind of bluish, kind of blackish, and they'd have brown. So it'd be brown and dark indigo. So yeah, you know, never knew that, but that's mainly because they needed to stick to the shadows, and what blended in the shadows was indigo. And yeah, that's what we kind of chose, or whatever's close to it anyway. So yeah. Other than that, this build is literally our defense build, so, kind of using our Matsubishi spikes, and we're going to use Toad Oil Bomb as like, well, I don't know, to be honest. I didn't really have much of a plan for it, but we're using Toad Oil Bomb kind of like a secondary Mitsubishi, I suppose. We don't really have much of a choice. We could say that it's gasoline or something. We're just fucking throwing gasoline into people's faces. That's the best answer that I have. Other than that, that's literally it. For this build, it's just pure damage, and it's just using the Mitsubishi spikes the most, to be honest with you. But that is also technically what most ninjas used. They kind of, they had obviously tools and such for, like, for example, a small wooden pocket lighter that they could read in the dark and that wouldn't cause too much of a light. It could also be used as literally committing arson. And, they just had a bunch of stuff on them usually. And most of the time, preparation was the key thing for a ninja at that time, and to be honest, any time. Because if you're not prepared, then, you most likely lost the battle before it even began. And this is a previous one that I had, because I had to try to do multiple different builds, and I didn't want it to get too boring. But yeah, this one is with Moon Medicine instead, and that is almost the only change, other than our weapon being the actual first ninja sword. And the first ninja sword doesn't really feel as practical or as realistic as the other one, mainly because the other one can actually stun the enemy, and it has a proper sword kind of slice and slash. But other than that, we're gonna kind of compensate with it by going invisible on this one and just kind of get shadow possession over and over again. And yeah, it's a pretty good build. It's very minimalistic, I'd like to say. But the success rate of it highly depends on your teammates and how well your teammates can kind of, distract the enemy and how often you can get the enemy to be on the ground. Since, the major thing with Moonlit Medicine is the fact that you have to not take a single action, and Shadow Possession, you have to do a double input, which you have to kind of wait for. the first moment when you actually have it. So, there's two different things that you have to wait for, which is a little difficult to pull off, but in this game I got 6 kills. So, yeah, not too bad necessarily. Other than that, enjoy the gameplay again. And there's gonna be like maybe a bunch more of this than there is the other builds, mainly because I found this one to be kind of slightly more easier to land in comparison to the others. Other than the Makabushi and the normal katana one, which that one did work out quite well actually as a healer. So that one worked better, and you'll kind of see it eventually again. So yeah, there's a few builds that work out really well, a few that don't, but it is what it is. And I think it's important to note that you should have fun when you're trying to use these, because a lot of players in this game don't like to have fun, and whatever is hard to land or hard to hit is generally fun. Like for example, in that moment right there, I was actually actually quite sneaky to actually get away from that healer, and then use Shadow Possession and melee the rest of it. So yeah, that was quite a good game again. And the following few are basically the exact same. This is the version that I was talking about with the Makabushi spikes, and you'll see how nice and technical it gets when you actually use the katana with or ninja toe. I'll just say it's a ninja toe because it doesn't actually have a curve. And unfortunately, this guy was teabagging, and he was just kind of being kind. But yeah, I didn't realize until after I started the combat. So it was too late to befriend him, even though in this game there's no befriending. So it is what it is. But yeah, I caught him lacking last second, hit him with the Shadow Possession, and he's assassinated. So I just wanted to talk about just the basic tools that the Shinobis would use. So for example, they would hollow out an eggshell by, for example, going ahead and poking a hole from the top and bottom of an egg, and then they'll blow from one end, and then they would rinse it out and dry it out. And then that way they would add usually iron fillings, sand, glass even, just pretty much anything that they needed to put in that would blind someone. And then they would essentially crack the egg and then throw it when the time comes. And the iron spikes were either genuine iron spikes or they were made from walnuts or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but it's something specific. So yeah, that's also another thing, and that's mainly because Shinobis back then didn't have good footwear, so it'd actually work on them, and they wouldn't be able to actually chase after Shinobis whenever they did actually go ahead and steal something and they were running away. And other than that, ninjas were meant to be pure espionage and such, and they are meant to be very, very sneaky and such. However, of course, Shinobi Striker doesn't really allow us to do that. But back then, Shinobis were very poor, and ninjas in general, they just couldn't afford much, and so the most they could afford was usually a few weapons, maybe a kunai, maybe not a lot of Makabushi spikes, but more or less they would use eggshells and such, the more common items that they could get a hold of, because again, they didn't have much of a budget in the beginning, in the first place. So yeah. So despite everything, they had to essentially steal information from one another, and they'd usually have to scout out camps for maybe days, weeks, heck, even maybe months, just because they had to track the routines and all of that stuff. So that's kind of what a Night Raid Shinobi would do. They would essentially scout the target, and then they would go ahead and, once they had enough information, they would go ahead and execute the plan to steal the information that's within the castle or camp or whatever it may be. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The one ninja kill that I got that felt like a ninja with the Moonlit Medicine and Shadow Possession was this one, because he saw me vanish, he got confused a little, and then hit with Shadow Possession and the cool little ninja slice. But yeah, that was the only one that I managed to kill that I felt like was kind of cool. But other than that one kill from a random game, as you saw, most of them can kind of work, but only if it's not against the clan, and if you're fighting against randoms, and if you're lucky that the randoms aren't using extremely good stuff. By good stuff, I just mean meta stuff. So the final question is, can you play as a ninja in Shinobi Striker? Well, the definition of a ninja is meant to be tactical and stealthy. You can't really be tactical and stealthy in Shinobi Striker, so in that case, no. But in the case that you want to almost roleplay as one and, have more or less the combat Hollywood type, then yeah, you technically can. But, not to ruin your dreams, it is what it is. But technically, you can execute some cool ninja stuff that would technically be realistic. So I'd say yes, but it's difficult.